Hi everyone, so today I will talk a little bit about MDMA assisted therapy, my experience with it, how I approached it, what I learned from it, and how it helped me on my healing journey from complex PTSD and trauma. MDMA assisted therapy came into my life long after I started psychedelics, so I think around 2 years after I started using psilocybin, and it kind of fell into my lap. It wasn't really on my radar, and so in broader terms, MDMA assisted therapy is really good for people with a dysregulated nervous system and with a constant fight or flight mode or a fawning mode. So in broader terms, what MDMA does is it quiets the amygdala, which is the more primal part of our brain, which is responsible for threat detection. So when we are approached by someone who's not safe, we can fight or flight, or we can fawn, or we can freeze, and all of those responses are within the amygdala. So it's kind of our primitive part of the brain, or not primitive, but it's a very a threat detection mode. And so for a lot of people with trauma, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for processing, for kind of evaluating things, seeing them in perspective, and so forth, and for more of a distant view on things, is not active, or not as active as for people that don't have trauma. So what this means is that for a lot of people, the amygdala is constantly firing and wiring. So while we are being approached maybe by a lion in the wild, of course it's amazing that we have it. It's a system that works. We get pumped full of our hormones, and we run from the lion, or we fight back, or hopefully not fight back to a lion. But so that's a bit the function of the amygdala. But if the threat detection mode, so the fire alarm, never went off, for a lot of people the amygdala is constantly firing and wiring, even as if we're running from a lion. So even when we're sitting in the bus, or on our way to yoga, or talking to a friend, it might go off. And so that was kind of my experience as well. And MDMA has a way of calming the amygdala and bringing the prefrontal cortex online, so that way we can start to process and approach things in a healthy way and actually move them through us. And so what happens a lot in talk therapy, a lot of people are in this constant threat detection mode, and so they literally cannot process their trauma because they cannot access their prefrontal cortex, or their system is not calm enough in the session to actually talk it through and realize, wow, this was then, this is now, I can feel my feelings, it's safe now, and so forth. So the beautiful thing about MDMA, there's incredible clinical trials around MDMA assisted therapy for trauma, for CPTSD, or for PTSD. And what it basically does is quiet the amygdala, so we don't feel so much fear and panic, and the prefrontal cortex comes online, so we can now process and access information and memories that before felt overwhelming. And so that was very much my experience. I was able to access memories that I didn't know existed. I was able to see things in a different light, and I was able to grieve and start the process of understanding, oh, this was then and now is now. And so that is one of the major things that I learned in MDMA assisted therapy. Is obviously, it sounds very logical, we all know that this happened 20 years ago and I'm not in danger anymore, but it's very, very difficult for the brain to understand that, and for our bodies to actually follow that. So it sounds very simple, but it is actually very, very hard for people with trauma. So that was my experience. I did 4 sessions. I had eating disorder before it, and I had extremely high stress levels. And already after the first session, my eating disorder went down, I don't know, from 150, let's say, to 40, and my stress levels from 180 to 70. So that was major for me, but my system quickly adapted to the new normal. So then suddenly 70 and 40 or 30 felt a lot. And so I also kind of went into it with like a quick fix. I want this to fix me and I'm done. But then afterwards I understood I have to do a couple of more sessions. I did that in a very safe container. I would like to say this as a disclaimer. It's very important to be in a safe container, to be with someone who's able to facilitate this in a safe environment. And I was with a therapist who was doing this with me. And so and then I did 3 more sessions. So in total I did 4 sessions, and each session kind of helped me progress. And after the 3rd session, my eating disorder was entirely gone. I didn't think about food anymore. I didn't have any problems with food anymore. It was just completely gone. Before I was obsessed about when am I going to eat, when I'm going to restrict, my brain was constantly evolving around these things, but suddenly it was gone. But at the same time, it was not easy, because the trauma. So the behavior maybe might have been gone. So the eating disorder is gone, but the eating disorder very much served a purpose in my life. So suddenly when the eating disorder was gone, I was left with these overwhelming feelings that it was covering before and that it was numbing me out from before. So the time between the sessions has been incredibly taxing for me and incredibly difficult, because things got better, much better, but at the same time they got much harder. And so that's a bit of paradox that I often observe in psychedelic therapy and psychedelic healing, that yes, it gets better, but it also gets harder, because in order to heal we need to feel. And so when one thing is removed or things are opened up, we actually have to go through those feelings now. And one thing I learned from one of my teachers was, she always said, like, the body only shows us what we can handle. And I really believe in that, even though difficult stuff came up, it only came up once I was ready. So that's a bit about my journey with MDMA assisted therapy. I will also share on the other psychedelics I've worked with many other ones, and my experience with all of them as a series in this on this YouTube channel. So if you're interested, hit subscribe below. I'd love to see you for more. And yeah, thank you.